Alright, in this video we are going to build the crest on the robot's helmet. So as we zoom in here we can see in the drawing how our crest is nice and curved around the side of our object. So we're going to start with just a simple plane, and as I drag that in we'll see we get quite a few segments along that plane. Let's make that full screen. So now I can actually convert this to an editable poly, or I can apply an editable poly modifier to it. It's similar in nature, but the edit poly modifier basically adds to the file size, where generally speaking, if I don't need to use it as a modifier, I shouldn't bother. So I'm just going to right click now and actually convert to editable poly. So you can see it gets rid of the modifier, and now it's just an editable poly. It's not a plane with an edit poly modifier on it. So now we're going to take a look at using things like soft selection. So as I turn on soft selection, you can see based on this fall off how far the soft selection extends through my object. So we're going to look at rotating and moving to get these vertices into position. Now as I adjust my fall off, I'll affect less and less of the object, or more of the object depending on where I go with that fall off. So as you just move stuff around here, we're going to kind of adjust until we rough this in where we want it. So we're not worried about perfect. There's a lot of things that we're going to keep doing to fine tune where these things are. So I want to generally continue to adjust my fall off so I'm affecting the object the way I want. So there's no absolute to what number that fall off should be set to. You just kind of have to kind of feel it out, and as you move stuff around, if you don't like it, remember, you can always right-click to cancel the operation and then adjust your fall off and keep going. So as we get this roughed in here, that looks pretty good. Now we need to build some thickness to this object. So we're going to take a look. We go to our front view here. We're going to grab this. We're going to move the whole thing over. All right, I didn't get the whole thing there. So I'm just going to leave the edit poly sub-object level. Just going to grab that object and drag it over to the side. So now we can go back to the sub-object level. I'm going to grab edge. There I can see I've got soft selection still turned on, so we're going to turn that off. We're going to grab all of the edges along the top edge there. Then I'm just going to shift drag them to the side. By doing that, see here, we've actually built some simple thickness to our object. Now, thickness isn't really, I suppose, the correct term there, because as you can see, each of these faces still doesn't have any thickness to it. What we're going to end up doing is completely closing in this object so it appears to have thickness. So now we're going to go to polygon. I'm going to select a polygon here. Turn on edge faces so we can see what's going on. When I select a single polygon, it would be nice to be able to select this entire side all at once rather than holding down the control key and clicking and selecting every polygon individually. Well, we do actually have the ability to do that. So if I turn on by angle, I'll also want to turn on ignore backfacing. When I turn on by angle, it's going to select everything from where I click within a 45-degree angle of what I click on. So I select that one polygon and it selects this entire flat side. So that's really, really helpful. Now if I don't have ignore backfacing turned on, depending on where I click and what I click on, it actually selected through that polygon and grabbed these polys as well. So I want to be careful. If I have ignore backfacing turned on, if I were in that same situation and clicked here, it wouldn't do that because it doesn't click through the object. So that's a generally a valuable checkbox to think about. We've got all these polygons selected. We're going to go to our front view here, and we're going to hold down shift and drag those polys over. So now that I've got them lined up, I'm going to clone to element, because I don't want a completely separate object. I just want that new set of polygons to be an element of this same object. So we'll go back to poly. Now, one thing we want to think about here, if I right click and go to object properties and turn on backface cull, when I look at this object again, these polygons are going to appear to have gone away. Well, I'll be able to see them from the other side because they're facing this direction, the same direction that these original polygons were facing. So from this side, they appear to be invisible. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to find my flip button. So under edit polygons flip, I can actually turn the direction that those polygons are pointing to the other side. That's going to matter in just a little bit. So when we go to vertex now, I'm going to select right around these vertices, and I can see as I select that, it looks like a single vertex, but I actually have 2 vertices selected. So all the new polygons that we copied over here are not connected to the original set of faces. So we want to go through here and select all those vertex pairs, and then we're going to find our weld button. Now I can just click on weld and see what happens, and it should actually weld them together. I have half the number of vertices. Let's undo that, and we're going to use the weld dialog box. The dialog box is going to allow me to have a radius or a threshold for how far it's going to try to weld things together. The farther I push that radius or threshold, the more it's going to try to snap all those vertices together. So for now, we really don't need that. We can use a real low weld threshold because these vertices are just about on top of each other. So we'll OK that. And now we're going to look at another method for joining those sides together. So let's isolate this object so we can see those bottom polygons. So now in isolation mode, you can see that we don't have any faces underneath our object here. So I'm going to go to the edge subobject mode, and I'm going to select all of the edges along these 2 open sides. And we're going to use our bridge tool to connect those. So as soon as I click on bridge, you see I've joined those polys together. Now, I deselect it, so we don't want to deselect before we OK that. So now that I've got that done, I can go to border, and if I select the border here, I select all the edges around an opening in my mesh. I can simply just click on cap, but for an object like this, it's generally not the best way to do it. As I move around, you can just barely see that within the shading there's not really a clean set of polygons. So what we're going to do, we're going to undo that, and we're going to actually bridge that as well. So I'm going to deselect, holding down the Alt key. Under edge, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and deselect the top and bottom edges there. So now that I've got just those sides selected, when I hit bridge, it's going to actually create that bridge using the edges that are there. So it's going to create new edges in between. It's going to give me a much, much cleaner set of polygons there. So let's do the same thing down here. We're going to start with border, select all the way around, switch to edge, deselect the top and bottom, and then bridge. So that's going to work out really nicely. Alright, so let's get out of isolation mode, and then we can see back here in our left view, we don't really have enough geometry here. So we need to smooth this out and round it out a bit more. So if I select one edge here and then hold down Shift, it's going to select all the way around that entire loop for me. So now I'm going to go to loops. I want to use Flow Connect. So when I hit Flow Connect, it's actually going to look at the angle of the geometry on both sides of where I'm connecting. So it's going to work real well in the interior of my object. So loops, Flow Connect. And then I can still make adjustments to that. But out here on the ends, Flow Connect is not going to work for me because what's going to happen is it's going to take into consideration the angle change between the set of front faces and the set of side faces, and it's going to bulge out on me. So we really don't want that. We're going to need to use just our regular Connect tool. So by hitting Connect, we now have a new set of edges and vertices to work with to be able to make adjustments and move things around. So Flow Connect can actually be a really valuable tool, but it's not perfect in every situation. So there we just connect, we go back to Vertex, and we can make some adjustments. Now I'm going to go back to soft selection here, and we're going to go with a lower fall off. And we're just going to kind of fine tune how these things are placed. So as we move this around, we'll want to make sure that we're actually getting everything to kind of penetrate through and stick into the object. Alright, that's a nice smooth curve. Now what we want to do, from the front here, we actually have a bit of a taper to this helmet crest. So we're going to want to grab, let's turn off soft selection for now so we can see a little better. We're going to want to grab the 2 sets of edges all the way along here. We could also do it with the polygons. So let's try that. We're going to grab those polygons, and since we still have biangle turned on, all these polys are within a 45-degree angle. So by doing that, we selected the entire top of the crest. Now if I turn on soft selection, I can see that I have a nice kind of rainbow that's pushing down. Let's adjust that a little bit because I don't really want to affect the very bottom. So now when we go to our front view here, and I right click to scale, we're going to scale just on the horizontal axis to widen that top edge out a bit. Now as we look around here and see, we actually have that helmet crest is got a nice taper to it. So it's nice and wide at the top, a little bit more narrow at the bottom. So that works out pretty well. Alright, so there's our helmet crest.